All right, hey guys, my name's David. I'm a volunteer ranger here at Katmai National Park. I'm here with our bear monitor, Ranger Leslie. We're going to be doing a live chat for the next hour or so. If you're not familiar with the live chat setup, we'll kind of talk about the bear monitoring program. I'll ask Leslie some questions about her work, and at the second half, we'll open up to questions from the audience, and you'll have a chance to answer some of the burning questions that some of our cam viewers have for you. So I'm a volunteer ranger. I'm on an internship with the SCA, that's the Student Conservation Association. That's an organization that puts students and recent graduates all over the country in places like national parks, national forests, and kind of gets them started with those kinds of organizations. So that's how I'm getting my start with the Park Service. I think people might be interested to know, how did you get your start?
I got my start working for a grad student at Glacier Bay, so I was hired through a university, and then I knew I wanted to get into the Park Service and work for them, so I decided to volunteer after that in their resource management division, and that got me bear experience and fisheries experience, and from that was able to be hired the following season, and yes, one experience has led to another, and here I am today.
That's awesome. And so you've been the Brooks Camp Bear Monitor for...
this is my fourth year.
Fourth year,
yep.
Okay. Very cool. So if you're wanting to get into the Park Service, wanting to have an awesome job like Leslie's, volunteer. That's the place to start, it seems like. And
it definitely, yeah. It gets your foot in the door, gets you knowing people, and it's a great experience to make sure you know that this is the correct field of work for you, because there's definitely some challenges and remote places to be.
Definitely. So we can kind of get started. You know, it might be worth going over kind of an overview. What exactly is the work you do? How do you monitor the bears? Do you have certain locations where you go each day? How often do you do your monitoring sessions?
Sure. So the bear monitoring, just in general, is looking at how the bears are using Brooks River throughout the day, and how many individuals are using the river each season, and that's sort of broken into a July season and then a fall season, which is mostly September, but into October as well. And so for about 5 hours each day, and that's broken down into a couple different shifts. I will be out on one of the platforms, counting the number of bears and recording how they're using the river. And this will be done through a scan sample. So every 10 minutes, I will count at that instant the number of bears. If I can identify those bears, I will, and then record, are they fishing, eating fish, are they playing? Mm-hmm. How are they using the river? And to go along with that, I'll count the number of people, the number of other sort of man-made noises that might be occurring, such as planes or vehicles that might be driving by during that 10-minute scan. So we can kind of get an idea as to how both people and bears are using the river together.
Very cool. And so this is actually one of the locations where you do those scans.
Exactly. Yep. Lower river here, and
right.
And I do another one at the Cut Bank, which is a little tree stand. So that's a great opportunity to get more of an opportunity to view the bears when there isn't a viewing platform and potentially a bunch of people all kind of surrounding or making noises. It's a place to kind of get more of a solo sort of look at the bears. And then the falls platform, I will do a monitoring session in July. But that's not included in the fall sessions that I'm conducting right now, and that's mostly because the majority of the bear use is in the lower river, and I know this year that's been a little different. We've had a lot more bear activity at the falls, but just to keep it consistent with the close to 20 years of data that has been taken through the monitoring program, it'll still just be done from the Cut Bank and lower river in the fall.
Mm-hmm. And so this is my first year in Brooks Camp, so everything I see is a notable behavior to me. I'm fascinated anytime I see a bear. You've been here 4 years. Is there anything you've seen this season that's been, maybe worth mentioning, worth talking about?
Yes. There's, several different things kind of pop up into my mind when you ask me that question. One, which I know a lot of people have been talking about, is that Holly's own biological cub has been following around 402 and her 2 yearlings, and that's been interesting to see. That's the first time I've seen that behavior of a newly independent subadult kind of trying to, it almost seems to be adopted by 402, and 402 sort of tolerates it, but it will also charge after the subadult and kind of there's still a space boundary there, I think, between the subadult and the family, whereas when 435 Holly had more or less adopted 503, it seemed like we'd see them nursing together, and there didn't seem to be that boundary, whereas it's sort of like the tables have turned, but not quite.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a certain amount of risk on Holly's biological cub that she's putting herself through by being around this other large bear, but then she's also getting, in a way, some protection because another bear is not going to come mess with her, is not as likely to if there's another big bear around.
Exactly, yes.
Very smart move on her part, it seems.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out in the future as well.
Yeah.
But it's lasted for a long time, since July, so...
Yep. Very interesting. Yeah. We'll have to see how that all plays out. So you mentioned that we've been doing, the park has been doing bear monitoring for about 20 years. What are some of the benefits of having such a long-term set of data for that?
It's great for looking at trends. Like for the past, I'd say maybe 5 years now, we've sort of been seeing fewer individuals using Brooks River, individual bears, that is. But since we have such a large data set that goes back 20 years, and then even more data beyond that, it was just collected a little bit differently. But we're able to then see patterns, to see that just because the number of individuals that are using the river now has been declining, it's not any less than it has been seen within the past 20 years, and that it's all part of a cycle that is probably not a reason to be concerned over, but it just allows us to see trends, and rather than little snapshots of what's going on, and just to look at how people are using the river through time. It's for management as well. Like, should we be trying to use fewer vehicles around the area? Does that disturb the bears? And we're just better able to see these trends as opposed to just kind of rare occurrences that don't necessarily have an impact.
Right. So not only can we see like what was the impact on that individual bear, we can see over a long period of time is the impact going to be on the actual population of bears that use the river. So that's very important, I would think.
Yes.
So you've got you mentioned that populations can change over time, and it's kind of a natural fluctuation. And if anybody's watching has seen the Bear ID book, in the new edition this year, we've got some of that information in the Bear ID book. Back to, I believe, 2000, the number of bears that we've seen use the river, put into a graph, so you can see this fluctuation of the bears here. What can you tell us about where are we at now compared to previous years? Do we know why that fluctuation occurs?
Well, that's something I'm hoping to figure out. I will be starting grad school in January, and that will be my project, is to take the data set that's been collected and look at the trends, the population, the numbers, look at ratios between males, females, sows with cubs, subadults, and then to look at different factors that might be causing those fluctuations or just might be influencing. Is it perhaps visitation or people usage? Is it the salmon run, which can have a huge effect on the amount of food available to the bears? And what other sort of factors could be causing that influence? So I'd say more to come. Will hopefully be able to be answered once I start looking further into this data. Right now it's been collected, but it doesn't always get the opportunity to be analyzed during the winter, depending on how staffing has been.
Right. And from that information, as you continue to do your research, I think what I would think is that we'll be able to learn, how can we then protect these animals? What do we need to do to make sure that they can continue to survive and continue to have a large population of bears here?
Exactly, yeah. And it's just through that simple looking at those graphs that have showed the population in time that has led to my question and doing graduate work. And that's a great way to also allows us to ask questions, which then will lead to hopefully somebody taking the time to research and find an answer to it. So
definitely,
with more research comes many more questions.
Awesome. So what we do know is that at least to some extent, bear populations and bears surviving is going to be tied to salmon, because that's their main food source, at least here. We've had a pretty strong salmon run this year. I believe the last count was 1.8 million in the Neck River. Salmon also continued to swim up the river after the counting towers were closed. We saw salmon continue to enter the Brooks River. That would imply that perhaps salmon were continuing through the Neck River as well. Have you seen any differences in bear behavior this season? Have they adapted well to not only the large salmon run, but there's also been really high water this year? Have you seen any differences in behavior to that regard?
Yes, I would say, yeah, the high water has definitely been a notable factor. It's the highest I think a lot of people have seen for several years. And I would say it seemed like at the falls there were fewer bears fishing the jacuzzi, at least consistently. We saw like 856 and 747 seems to almost want to go to the far falls and fish over there as opposed to the jacuzzi. And I can't say for sure why they would choose to do that, but it could just be that's how the salmon were moving. There were more fish that were jumping that far falls area and being a little bit more successful, but also just shallower water, and depending on how easy it was for them to sit in the jacuzzi and successful, it just seemed like that wasn't exactly the place this year to be fishing. And then throughout the lower river, especially in July, it just seemed like we didn't have as much of the dash and grab fishing. They almost had to go more for the snorkeling and picking up dead fish in July, any bears that wanted to fish below the falls, just because there was such a large water column. The bears couldn't easily move through it to fish and catch any of the to catch a big school of fish or hope to stun at least one of the fish. And then for the advantage of the salmon was that they just had a bigger water column to move through, so they can escape a lot easier. So
more places to run, to swim off to.
Exactly. And so, perhaps that just made the Brooks River a little bit less desirable for bears that wanted to fish in a more protected area, like below the falls. It just may not have been as a successful place for them, so they might have tried to fish elsewhere. And we did see relatively the same number. We saw 32 bears in July, at least that was what the monitoring session recorded as having that number of individuals. And that was, I think we had seen maybe around 33 or 36 or something last year in July. So it's about the same, but perhaps a little on the low side, and that could just be one of the reasons, was just there might have been more advantageous streams to be fishing if you were a sow's cub or a young sub-adult or something like that just couldn't handle the big boys at the falls.
So we're seeing bears adapt to changing conditions. Really is kind of shows how well they can survive in a number of different environments. So they can adapt to changes. Saw about the same amount of bears, but maybe using the river a little bit differently.
Yeah, exactly.
So along with that, you mentioned we haven't seen maybe as many at the falls, at least all at one time. There's always a lot of competition on this river. Have you seen any bears in particular be more successful this year than you have in years past, or the opposite of that? Have you seen any be less successful than in years past?
Well, it was very interesting watching 128 kind of dominate sort of the platform side of the falls. So I'd say she definitely kind of made that work for her. She really stepped up in raising the cubs and being very protective and defensive over them. So I'd say, yeah, she made that work for her. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, like 480 Otis was there in his corner doing his thing. So I'd say, yeah, a lot of the bears still who did show up, they made it work for them. And we've seen, bears definitely put on the weight and the pounds that they need to for the fall.
So, actually, this is just a question that I've been wanting to ask. Does 480, does he look, now that you've mentioned him, does he look larger than in previous years? Is he always that large?
He has definitely gotten to the epic proportions that he is. But I'd say he did a fine job for himself this year, and he did so pretty quickly. It seems like in years past he showed up pretty skinny and had to work for every pound, whereas I think he's just kind of come into a groove and knows is what works for him. And yeah, he's done well.
And I wonder if that maybe could be related to a strong silver salmon run. We saw a lot of silver salmon coming through the river and jumping the falls. Really, they're still jumping the falls to some extent, which is not something I expected to see. So I wonder if maybe he was able to take advantage of that and jump on that opportunity.
Exactly, that worked well for him this year.
It sure did, yeah. Okay, so kind of my last take home of the bear monitoring program is just, why do you do it? Why is it important? What can we learn?
It is important for Katmai because as a national park, our mission statement is to preserve a large bear population, and this is one of the best ways to just go about is to just do a count. What are we seeing and what are we seeing through time? Are we maintaining that, and what can be done differently to perhaps to help maintain that? So that's the big reason. Why I personally do it is just like the love of watching the bears and getting to see them sort of grow, develop how they use the river, getting to know them, getting to also just spend time with other people that are out on the platforms and working with people. It's great to kind of be able to share enthusiasm and what I see and what other people see. It's a fun experience, so it keeps me coming back.
It is pretty wonderful to have this experience and then also be able to share it with people who are also very excited about it.
Definitely, yeah. You can go share stories even if somebody missed out on something. It's easy to catch up on, and it also helps, as I'd mentioned before, just in knowing that how the park is being managed, that it is being done well in order to keep the large bear population, and that's why we have some of the rules, such as the 50-yard rule. Not, it is just to try to keep humans safer from, keep a nice buffer distance, but it also is in order to try to keep that bear feeling comfortable enough to continue using the river, and that it's not just about us, it's about them as well.
This is the bear's home.
Right.
We're here visiting.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we'd like to, turn things over to questions for now. I'm going to start off with a question that I've been wondering about as well. I know I'm getting like the prime access to questioning for Leslie. But I think it's a question that a lot of the audience members have been wondering. 435's biological cub. Do we have a number?
We do now, yes. So this is her year to get numbered. And so this year was, in the progression of things, would be a 700s sort of number. And we already have, a 700 that's been seen at least within the past few years, down to like 708. So 710s this year were the number to start with. And what pulled out, there were 3 bears that got numbered from July. And 435's sub-adult gets the number 719. 719.
I like how you...
Sorry, I had to lead up to everything.
A lot of anticipation with that one. So 719, we can start calling that bear 719. It'll be a lot less confusing than all the other things we've been calling it.
Right, at least there's that consistency now.
Yes. So that kind of brings up a point. How do you number the bears? Is it totally random? You mentioned that we're starting all the numbers with 7 this year for new bears. How do the other numbers come about?
Right. So yeah, each year we will try to go for new hundreds number. So next year we'll be numbering in the 800s, and we pick numbers that haven't either been used before, or if it has been used before, that bear hasn't been seen in the past 5 years. So then we'll recycle the number. And just for the sake of consistency, I try to kind of give them a little space from other bears that might have been numbered, and also just to be able to number them, any new bears, relatively sequentially, and that way, in going back and looking through years past, we can tell how many bears were numbered that year, how many were sort of new, I guess you could say, and that kind of gives us an idea as to the influx of bears, new bears, and not just the same sort of consistent ones that we see regularly.
Cool. So you mentioned that there's been 3 bears that have been given numbers.
Yeah.
Would you be able to give a quick description of the other 2 and what their numbers are?
Sure. So we have a 717 who I believe is another small subadult, was kind of seen just sporadically throughout July, and was pretty shaggy, had a pretty skinny little muzzle, a little bit upturned, and I've been also seeing it in the fall as well. So yeah, possibly a new subadult, just like on its first independent year. And then there was another sow that seemed a little bit older, and she had the 718 number, and yeah, that might have just been her first year kind of wandering in here, or first like consistent sightings here, or it is just possible that we can't always recognize bears from year to year, and in that case, the bears will just get new numbers. It's most important just to say, like, okay, we've had this many individuals, regardless of what number they have received in years past. It is great to be able to follow stories such as Holly and 435, and to be able to tell ages, but it's unfortunately not always possible to be able to ID them and follow them, especially subadults. They change so much, so hopefully we can recognize this like 717 bear in years to come, but it may show up next year looking completely different.
Getting a new number.
Exactly. So
very funny. Okay, so then there's also been some bears that we've seen along the river. I talked to you a little bit about this already before we started the broadcast. There's a bear that we've been calling not 274. Turns out that is a bear that already has a number. Could you speak to that a little bit? Okay,
yeah, I believe we're talking about 68, and that was a bear that has normally been seen in the fall. And when I saw it kind of using the falls a bit more, it sort of, it's like, you seem familiar, but something's, you're definitely hundreds of pounds lighter, so it's a little hard to recognize it. So that's sort of what the position of bear monitoring has to do, is kind of go back through all the other years of photos and data and try to be able to match up numbers if possible.
Right.
And that it was hopefully able to do correctly, but I do, yes, believe that it was bear 68, and we've been seeing him around in fall as well, though much heavier and much like his normally observed self.
Right. It's incredible how much they change throughout the season. I've just now gotten a handle on identifying 68 in the fall. But I never would have guessed that was the same bear, the one that we had seen in July. Right, yeah. Amazing. Yes, coats being shed and not shed, and yeah, the weight gain is huge. Yeah. And then, okay, so another bear that we didn't have a number for, turns out already had a number. The sow we've been calling Charging Sow with 2 cubs. Yes, that is bear 504. She was not seen last year, at least it wasn't registered in the monitoring sessions, but the year before that, she was given that number of 504, so that was her sort of debut. And so, yeah, how familiar she is with the Brooks River area, can't really say for sure. She wasn't one of the usual suspects, so that may be a reason why she's just acting a little differently, a little less comfortable, it seems, with some either people and bears as well. And when she showed up in the beginning of the season, she was quite skinny. Exactly, yeah. but since then has been pretty successful. You know, a little sporadic at times, but she's put on quite a bit of weight, and so have her cubs.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 3 or more mysteries solved. Moving on to a question that will be a little bit more difficult to answer. There's a lone cub, subadult. Looks like maybe a yearling or a small subadult that's been wandering around on its own. Do you have any information on that? Do you know? You know, it's always going to be almost impossible to say, oh, well, that belongs to this sow.
Right.
Do you have any comments on that? That
right.
cub?
Yeah. Exactly. I have seen that. It's hard to say. It kind of looks like a yearling. You know, perhaps it's a very small 2-year-old subadult on its own. And as you had said, yeah, we just can't tell for sure. If we had genetic information from it and a whole bunch of the different sows, then we could maybe say that, oh, look, it's related to this sow. But we don't at this time. So yeah, can't really say. We haven't noticed any particular sow that has lost one. That at least this year that we've seen show up in July and is now down one that looks very much like that cub.
Right.
So it's hard to say. It could have just gotten separated from its mother in a different location and found itself here, and it's in fall. It's a great place to be, Brooks River. So if it can do well on its own, it might have a chance.
So there was some talk about 94 because last year she was seen with 2 cubs. This year, 1, as far as I know. Maybe you could clear this up a little bit. I think there's been some confusion both on my part and on others. Did 94 show up with 2 cubs at the beginning of the season, or did she show up with just 1?
I just saw her with 1 this year. But yes, last year she did have 2 spring cubs with her, sort of a light and dark one, and it's how cubs change. I can't say for sure which one that she currently has with it. So yeah, she is down 1, but can't say for sure whether or not that lone cub is hers or not.
We've seen a lot of cubs this season.
Definitely.
I think the count that I have is 25. Does that sound about?
It sounds about right. I try not to count cubs just because it can lead to terrible tears and stuff.
So, do you have any? Have you sexed any of the cubs? Do you know whether or not they're male or female?
I try to. That can be very hard. Kind of have to wait till they urinate and just kind of see what end it comes out of. But yes, 94s is a male. 273s is a male. Some of the others, like 504, the dark one, I'm pretty sure is a male, and I think there's a few other ones that, like, if I see it, I'd note it and then have to go back and look at my notes. So the other sort of hard part is just being able to distinguish sets of cubs, and so you can remember that, like, okay, that particular cub is male or female. So it's first usually a matter of, big, medium, small, or light versus dark, and being able to kind of identify them and then tell what sex it is.
Right.
But those are the for sure ones.
So there's a reason that bears don't get numbers until they're on their own.
Exactly.
So we talked a little bit about, remind me of the number, 435's.
719. Yes.
719. It'll still take me a few days.
That's okay.
719 has been following around 402 and her family quite a bit.
Yes.
Do you have any? It's all just guessing at this point. Do you think that she'll follow her all the way to den? Do you think she'll at some point be chased off? Do you have any comments on this whole situation? It's very interesting.
It is quite interesting, and yeah, as you mentioned, it is speculative. It's going to be guesswork. I don't know what she's planning, but
it's an evil plan.
Exactly. If I were to guess, I would say 719 would possibly try to follow and use 402 to her advantage to den. It seems like 402 isn't letting her that close to the family, though, so my guess would just be that maybe 719 will kind of den close by or just watch and observe and then go dig her own den, but there's no way of us to know for sure right now. But
so 719 has a number. I've got a question here that says, what determines if a bear not only gets a number but a nickname? For example, Velcro, or for example, BioCub 719. What is the determining factor there?
I would say it was definitely something that happened earlier in the monitoring, and it still sort of happens, like, until I number 719, it has to be recorded somehow, and that's how kind of nicknames form. How do you remember that cub?
Right. It's the one with blonde hair.
Exactly.
They all have blonde hair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you might see it doing some sort of weird characteristic or weird activity, so you'll just kind of come up with a nickname there, and sometimes the nicknames stick. That's sort of been getting away from a little bit as of more recently, but for the most part, they all get numbers, and it's easy for me to record a 3-digit number as opposed to a long nickname, and to continuously come up with nicknames, especially if a bear's only going to be seen for one season.
Right.
We don't know that yet.
Wasted that really good nickname.
Exactly, yeah. So, yeah, they will all get numbers. Some of them will get nicknames, and I might just use a nickname for my own personal use for a season.
Right.
That is how it started. It was for the monitor's personal use, and then it just kind of grew from there.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's no guarantees that they'll keep getting nicknames, or we'll come up with the most ideal nickname ever. But
So what I'm getting is, we assign numbers. We don't assign nicknames. They just kind of happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. So along that line of subadults, I've got a question here. Is it possible to determine if an unknown bear was a subadult in prior years, or is it typical to not be able to recognize subadults as they become older?
That is very difficult, to recognize subadults, even if it's a subadult coming, or a smaller bear that we're unfamiliar with and can't ID right away. Is it a subadult or not? It can be a gray area, because you're sort of just basing it off size and how it acts, and how lanky is it, and is it acting very nervous around other bears versus more confident. So yes, the records don't always show a bear as to how old it is, or when we saw it as a subadult, it may have just arrived as an adult. And we can't always follow it from as being a cub to a subadult. Sometimes we just have to say, we don't know where you came from, but this is the first year we've seen you, or recognized you, and you are getting a number this year. So yeah, that is a constant struggle, the subadults.
Got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
So we had a really interesting observations at the beginning of the season. We saw 435 show up with 503 and 719 at the time, her biological cub. We saw them show up all together, and then later we saw them all apart. So at some point during June, the emancipation occurred. She kicked them out of the house. Have you ever seen that happen? Have you ever seen a family show up and then split up later in the season?
I haven't seen it in the 4 years that I've been here. I don't think it's too atypical. I think that, anytime in the spring they can be kicked out, and it may also just be a factor of when 435 enters estrus and other males start following her around. The cubs can't stay around then, as we saw with 503 himself, when 402 went into estrus when he was still a dependent cub. He had to leave and couldn't go back. So that could be the reason, but it is hard to say for sure what the final determining factor of you're no longer welcome in this house anymore.
Cool. So we've talked about what bears we've been seeing, what bears we've gotten new numbers. Have there been any bears of note that you haven't seen this year that you've seen last year or in recent years previous?
I feel like there always are. It was interesting seeing like 708 this year with her yearlings, and she hadn't been seen last year. She was one of the ones I remember from last year, just kind of being like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen her. That's kind of a strange one. Oh boy, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I think you had mentioned 813.
Oh, that's right. Yes. She had been seen with yearlings last year and hasn't been seen yet this year. So we're still keeping an eye out for her. But who knows? She might just be using a different area.
Right.
She, since we've seen like 132 in her gaggle of 2-year-olds, perhaps 813 still has her somewhere else as well.
Right.
But yeah, we haven't seen her yet, and we'll just kind of wait and see.
So maybe she's using another river. Maybe she's over at Margot. Maybe she's in a smaller creek somewhere, avoiding all the large dominant male bears here, perhaps.
Exactly.
Maybe she's been here and we just haven't seen her.
This is also very true.
Yeah. So that's why, as far as the Bear ID book goes, that's why we have that section of bears no longer seen. Because you never know, they might show back up again and we'll just bump them back into the normal section.
Yep.
So, as far, we talked about being able to determine subadults, cubs and subadults into adults. How much record keeping is done of lineage? Are we ever able to keep track of who is related to who?
We try to, if possible. The huge gap being when a cub shows up its first season as an independent subadult. That's usually the hardest time to be able to recognize it on its own. Some are lucky enough they have a distinct feature that allow it to be identified. And so if that's sort of something we speculate as being possible, we'll try to keep it in, even if they're just hunches. Otherwise, we can only kind of just do it if we had genetic research done as to how related they are. But yeah, what the monitoring can do is more speculative, and only the distinct subadults can really be followed from cub to subadult, and they have to be regularly viewed. So regular users, it's much more difficult to identify bear that may only show up a few days in July, as opposed to one that's here almost every day, and you can see a distinct kind of pattern as to how it likes to fish and that sort of thing. So
and so maybe that's something that Michael Saxton's genetic study will help us determine. So this is another speculative question, but these are always fun to answer too.
Oh gosh.
Do you think that cubs from the same litter remember each other the next year? Same goes for the parents. Do you think a mother bear remembers its cub that's now a subadult in later years? Right.
Yeah. Definitely speculative. You can never.
We can't ask them. They won't tell us.
I know. They never fill out surveys. It's such a shame. It does seem like, though, sometimes they might recognize or act a specific way. Like if we've seen 503 and 719 occasionally encounter each other on the river and play with each other. So it does seem like there's some recognition. Also, like 435 has kind of come after and maybe sort of charged after 719 a few times, and that's more of just kind of like, hey, this is my space. I'm adult. You're a little sub-adult now.
Right.
Learn your place.
Play your part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as to whether or not 435 is actually remembering that that's her own cub, we can't say for sure. But there does at least kind of seem to be, amongst siblings, at least they're willing to play with each other.
Right.
We can see that a bit more, but subadults in general tend to be a little bit more playful. So yeah.
And we know that they're smart. We know that they can remember other things, like where to get the fish.
Exactly.
What time to come and fish. So it would seem reasonable that they might remember who is who. But as far as being friendly with one another or giving each other special treatment, it doesn't seem that is really in their best interest. Yeah. So we've got 3 new bears with numbers. As far as the existing bears, which ones do you think are the hardest to identify?
Oh dear. Any of the ones that don't show up regularly. The subadults. Fall can be a difficult time, especially later in the season. You get bears that like to come sort of either after camp closes and things are quieted down, and you can't always recognize them from July. So it's you don't have a big data set in your mind as to what that bear looked like from years before, and now they're just kind of showing up. So fall bears in general, and subadults changing all the time. In coming back for 4 years, like my first year here, yes, it was crazy difficult to try to put things straight just from photos. And so luckily, the more I've come back, the more sort of mental images I've collected, and things kind of pop into place a little bit easier. It hasn't been too bad struggling with any particular bear, but usually whenever a bear first shows up, you're kind of going through your own little mental database of who could it be, size-wise, how's it fishing, coloration, all of that. So yeah, usually a bear first shows up, I'm binoculars to the face, and don't ask me questions, I don't know, I'm trying to figure this out. So that can be frustrating, I'd say.
Sure.
But yeah, luckily there hasn't been a particular bear, just all new bears in general.
Yeah, I know for me, I started to get a handle on some of these bears, on a lot of these bears in July, and then fall came around and I had to start all over.
Exactly, they're not fishing the same places anymore, too.
I don't know who any of these bears are anymore, so you kind of have to relearn everything.
Exactly.
And that's part of the challenge, part of what makes it fun. So you get to spend quite a bit of time out on the cut bank in your raised chair. How much time do you get to spend out there, and what kind of things do you get to see from there that you might not see at the falls or down here?
So in the fall, I do a bit more monitoring there, just because I'm just bouncing back between the two locations of Flower River and the cut bank, and so I'll spend between 2 and 3 hours a day at the cut bank. And this year was much more of a nursery, although the entire river kind of seemed to be filled with sows and cubs. But it seemed like there were a number of family groups that liked to use that area, and that can just be for a number of reasons. Of one, there aren't as many dominant male bears there like there are at the falls, but they still have the opportunity to catch carcasses or half-eaten fish scraps that might be drifting down, and they might have first dibs on them as opposed to the lower river where it has to kind of push that whole way, and so they're kind of looking for the little dead salmon zones where they can scavenge some fish. And it may also just be that some of those bears didn't like sort of the noise and hubbub that sometimes happens around the lower river with people moving back and forth and camp right here. So you do you get a first look, I think, at some of the bears that are a little less familiar with the camp area. And you also can see some like bear and angler or photographer interactions as to how bears can sometimes just react of fishing throughout the entire river, and how the more people that kind of squishes out how much of the river the bear is able to use in that one location. So it's kind of where to see the balance of how the two play out, of both people and bears there, and which bears kind of like that environment versus the other bears that they don't care. The bears keep on fishing right through a line of anglers or photographers, and that's just how they roll.
Right. Sounds like some key information. Have you ever been stuck up there? That was a question I got.
There's definitely been some interesting and close calls, yes, even recently. In the fall, that's when bears tend to just kind of plop down somewhere and sleep for a while. So they usually, I take a volunteer in the fall to travel with, to make safe decisions, and to also be able to travel in a group, because that can happen, and that's not exactly a fun place to get stuck, especially since I do evening monitoring and the sun's about to set in 10 minutes, and it would get dark and kind of dangerous.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely you have to be a little closer than I'd like to for bears in order to try to leave and give it its space. If there's a bear already at the tree stand before I arrive, I don't move it out of the way. I can monitor somewhere else. But yeah, sometimes having to leave either quickly because a bear is approaching, or to perhaps just leave as quietly as possible and let a resting bear sleep, or taking a different trail and trying to bushwhack back. It's been a little interesting. Had to do that this year. Luckily, you just keep on heading in a direction, and the trail is eventually going to be there. So.
Right.
So So yeah, I luckily haven't had to stay up there too long, but I'd say at least half an hour has kind of been the waiting period, as long as there's daylight. Otherwise, I'm going to try to probably radio somebody for help if I have to stay up past sunset, because that's a risk I'm probably not going to take.
Yeah, those radios are a great tool that we have.
Yes.
So very exciting job. I've got somebody here who wants to know what kind of education does somebody like you have? If I've got some people here that are interested in maybe becoming rangers, becoming bear monitors, or something like that. What kind of degrees, or what would you recommend as far as education?
So yeah, for the sort of resource management field that I'm in, or biology, wildlife, it is good to have. I have a bachelor's degree right now. It's in natural resource management, but biology or wildlife biology, ecology. That would also work. In applying for the job, you have to have so many credits of like biology courses and wildlife management courses, genetics. So those courses are helpful, and then sit out in the rain and tolerate cold and to represent the organization well. So it's a number of factors, and volunteering can really help an employer and a potential a person know that, hey, this job is for me because I can do that well, or no, I need something that's a little bit more private into myself.
Right.
And then I think to go farther into the field of research these days, getting a master's and doctorate is becoming more important, and so that's what I am hoping to do in the future, starting this winter. And that'll help just to be able to take the data and actually start analyzing it and answering questions with it, as opposed to just being like the data collector.
So education, one part of it; on the ground experience, another very valuable part of it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've talked a lot about younger bears. We got a question here about one of our older bears, 410.
Yes.
Is she the longest documented bear at Brooks Falls? And it says, it blows my mind that she's still actively courted.
Yes.
Us too.
Yes, indeed. Just gotta love her. She's a trooper. There might have been, I think, one other bear, Cinnamon. It was before I came here, that I believe was older, recorded as being older than she was. However, currently, yes, she is the oldest documented bear, and yeah, she keeps on rocking it. So there's no way to say when when she's not going to come back.
Yep.
Which would be sad.
Have you seen her back in fall?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that's been good. She's been in the lower river kind of doing her thing and taking nice long naps, which she so enjoys.
Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
If you want more information on Cinnamon, that's in the Bear ID book. You can check that out as well. You can download that just below the video screen, between the video screen and the chat. So we're getting to be starting to run out of time here. It'd be cool to talk about, some of those under the radar bears. There's a long list of bears that people are wondering about here, but we won't be able to cover them all. But have we seen 500, 813, 602? Are there any bears that we don't see all the time that you can think of off the top of your head that have showed up this year?
Right. 500 did make the scans in July, but not very consistently. And I think I'd just been around, but yeah, it's definitely under the radar this year, not like her first year as a sub-adult. And that happens. That's typical, that a bear will show up one year and then just kind of not be as present, or it may never have been a very well-known bear, or even kind of made it into the ID book, but all of a sudden if it's a female and shows up with cubs, it's in the spotlight now because everyone likes to follow a cute furry cub. So
right.
So yeah, that's how you can kind of get the 504s that were under the radar before but are now very much in the radar, and that'll also just kind of depend on how the bears want to use either this river or the surrounding area, and that would be my guess as to what 500 has been up to, just kind of using other streams and exploring the area, since it's all kind of new to her.
Right. So I just kind of switched over to the chat board, so I wanted to grab a couple questions there before we leave. Up to now, I've been grabbing questions from that pre-made document where people were putting questions in. there's some people that are wondering about 814. That is a bear that we haven't seen recently. We believe may have been the dead bear we found behind the falls. Do you have any? Were you able to see those photos of the teeth?
I did see. Yes. Yeah. It is hard to say for sure. Especially because we couldn't take any sort of genetic sample, and it wasn't a cause of death. Also wasn't.
Right.
Wasn't very obvious.
Right.
But I haven't seen him in fall, and so he's one that usually will show up. So the best we can do is just kind of keep on waiting and see if we see him. I can't say definitively one way or another as if it was or not, but since we haven't seen him, signs continue to point perhaps that it was.
Right. So we'll become more and more sure
exactly
as time goes on. Yeah. So another bear that people have been wondering about is 451. Early in the season, I think it was in July, I took a video of her from right here. It looked very much like her. To you, did you see? Did you ever confirm that? Yes, that was her. Did you ever see her again? Have you seen her this year?
Right. Yeah, I haven't been able to confirm one way or another if she's been around. Haven't seen her in any of the scans. So hard to say if she's around or just using the river, a different river this season. So unfortunately, we'll never really know until if she shows back up.
Right. Okay. So she may be, using another river. Maybe she was here and we haven't seen her. Have there been any? Well, actually, have you seen 89? That's another bear that people have been wondering about quite a bit.
I think I did see him closer to the falls when I was monitoring at the cut bank just recently. So I think he's around, but I don't believe he's made it into a scan yet. So he wouldn't officially be counted into the monitoring book for the fall session, because there are 2 sessions of July and fall. So we'll see. But I did see him in the fall at least.
And so, how does a bear get registered? Do you have to see it a certain number of times? How does that work exactly?
Right. A bear needs to be seen for the monitoring in order to be counted in 3 different sessions before it'll officially be recorded. And that's just because we're trying to get record bears that are regular users of Brooks River and not just ones that might kind of come or go. And it also gives the opportunity to we have to be able to recognize the bear. And if we can't do it on 3 different occasions, we can't say for sure that is a specific bear. So if I just see a bear once and then never see it again, it won't get officially recorded into we saw 32 bears in July, or the monitoring count that gets done of saying 32 bears.
Right.
And so and there's the July count, and then there will be the fall count that will come out. And so far, I think I've seen around 25 recorded 25 individuals. I think it's about to go up soon, just because there've been some new bears that have started to show up, and so once again they just need to make it into a couple more scan sessions before they'll officially be counted.
Right on. Well, lots of exciting stuff today. Some mysteries have been solved. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
I don't think we've ever gotten so many questions in a live chat this season, so we're gonna have to try to get you on more often.
Okay.
It's been great. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.